Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to today's video. Today is mainly going to be a discussion type video on my thoughts and feelings about post AGOF and YCS Indie that's coming up pretty soon. And maybe I talk about this so I can, share my thoughts and maybe have a little bit of discussion about the format overall. As you can see from the video, like the title, it's actually not clickbait at all. I'm actually not really sure about what deck to play, and I'm also not really feeling the format that much. And to give you some context, I normally practice for YCS, leading up to a YCS every day, right? I'm talking about like 3 hours, 4 hours of playtesting every day, whether that's theorizing or actually playing itself. And I feel like historically, I would be able to feel some sort of comfort with my deck choice from playing a lot. I think the issue is that the format that I'm heading into, like YCS Annapolis, which is going to be post AGOV, I just feel like there's way too many decks in the format, and every deck just feels terrible. And usually, I'm a big person, a big proponent of making a really good deck call, like a good deck choice, right? Because picking a good deck for an event, I feel like, is a very good recipe to not only doing well but potentially winning the event itself. And the issue is right now is I don't think there is a quote-unquote good deck to consider playing, because I think every deck kind of like loses to something. Like there isn't a really like a solid deck right now that I feel like really comfortable, which has like the least amount of lose conditions. Like a good example is, like, let's say I want to play like Pearly. I feel like I'm just gonna get like barriered. If I want to play Tier Elements, I'm gonna get Dweller, right? Like there's just, and the thing is, because the format is so wide, it's almost like a guessing game in terms of what non-engine you even decide to put in your main deck. Do you build for the combo decks? Do you build for the mid-range decks, right? Like, do you build for Vanadium? Do you build for Tier Elements? Do you build for Unchained, right? Do you build for Rescue Ace? Do you build for Pearly? Can you even build for all of these decks, right? And to be quite frank, as I go through my options, I don't think you realistically can. And so here I am, kind of like just not really ranting, but kind of just talking about like how I think I almost feel like at a standstill, where I've been trying to like figure out the deck, but I just haven't. And I think maybe this is gonna be the first YCS in a while where I'm just gonna go in and kind of just pick a deck that I feel kind of okay with. And maybe that's fine too, right? But I think like that feeling isn't necessarily great, and like when I go to YCS, like feeling that way is not the best feeling in the world. But I still will want to play. I just don't know if I will play, right? Because like I think maybe skipping one YCS like this could be fine, because I just honestly don't feel that I'll do well from a gut perspective. And the reason why I say that is because I've been in formats like this before. And like, for example, like the Nationals format of 2022, where there were a million decks, right? You didn't really know what to prep for. The combo decks were so strong, like the Right of Our Major plus like Red Rose stuff was so powerful. And I feel like almost going second, you need like so many hand traps to beat it, or else you just like instantly lose. And so yeah, then that's kind of where I am with the format. So my question is, as you guys are also preparing, right? How do you get comfort with your deck choice? Because I think that's a question that I've been trying to like think about for a while now, and I think like when I look through all my options, there's a lot of pros and cons, and more cons than pros for a lot of decks that you can pick out of, right? And I'm gonna give you an example. Like I can, like, for instance, name about like 5 decks right now, and maybe more, like 10 decks that are playable in the format that are just a threat. Like a deck that I actually feel that if I play against a YCS, if I'm not prepared for, can actually legitimately lose to, right? Flaunderies, Labyrinth, Vanadium, Infernoble, Tier Elements, Unchained, Pearly, Rescue Ace. Like all these options, like even Dark World, right? All these options, right, makes it very, very hard to, I feel like, build a cohesive enough main deck, because I feel like making it through the Swiss rounds is going to be very, very difficult. And everyone always talks about like building your deck to win the event versus building your deck to top. But I feel like almost as if like I feel like I have to build my deck to top, just because I don't even know if I will top if I don't. But at the same time, like, how do you do that when there's so many decks in the format? And that's kind of like the hardest thing about this, I think, right? Like the fact that like it's not necessarily like a bad thing that there's so many decks, but it's like the fact that all these decks that I'm talking about are actually like good enough to like do like compete, or like decks that I can actually feel like I'll see at a YCS, right? So it's scary, right? And so when a Rise Heart was still legal, yes, Kashtira was a very dominant deck, and there weren't a lot of surrounding decks because Kashtira made it so a lot of decks became unplayable as a result. But I think if you think about it, like that almost in a way was a good thing, because it actually made it so like decks like Tritron, decks like Infernobles, decks like Vanadium couldn't really be played. But now as a result of a Rise Heart being banned, there isn't really that many good shifter decks left, right? And a lot of more graveyard centric decks are coming out, like the 2 Elements decks, for example. And my gripe with those type of decks is that like I think they're so strong going first, but I just don't see myself winning an event with 2 Elements with the new stuff because of Dweller, right? Like we can look at, for example, Vanquish Soul. Vanquish Soul can make Dweller going first. Rescue Ace can make Dweller going first. The moment you make Top Cut, or the moment like I show up to an event, someone's gonna be like, okay, look, Pack top the last 2 events with Unchained. Maybe I'll just blind Dweller him, And I think like that is also a legitimate concern on why like I don't think any of those decks are good, because of the fact that Dweller, Inscription, DD Crows, like all these type of cards are being played, right? So for me to like kind of ignore that and just say YOLO, let's say I'll just play 2 Elements, it's kind of almost kind of like arrogant, right? It's like I feel like it wouldn't necessarily work out unless I get lucky, but I don't want to be in a position to only do well because of getting lucky. I want to pick the right choice or the right deck choice because I think it actually makes sense in the format, right? So that's kind of like where I am with this whole format with post Agoff, because post Agoff introduced the Deal the Star engine, and it introduces the Horus cards, and it introduces Little Knight, right? Little Knight by default makes every deck way stronger from an end board perspective. So it's gonna be really, really difficult to kind of compete, because like that Little Knight is not only follow up because you can banish your own cards, but it can also banish your opponent's stuff, and it just makes like the interruption even more varied. The Horus cards are interesting because they're super, in my opinion, go first cards. Like I think going second, those cards are not as good, because if people interact with your sarcophagus, you pretty much just win like -1. The Horus cards, by going first though, is so powerful. Like they're just like they're super plus. They work really well with like the PK cards, for example. People are playing them in Horus tier elements, for example. But then the Horus cards are super high roll in my opinion, because of the fact that you make Zombie Vampire, you don't know what your opponent's playing. You might just get smoked by the fact that they have, graveyard cards, right? And then you have the Deal the Star cards, which are like insane at making Rescue Ace more consistent. It makes Infernoble more consistent. You can use it in the pure Synchron deck, because the Synchron deck requires tuners, it requires non-tuners, and the fact that it gives it a level 7 is like really, really strong. So as you can see, like a lot of these engine, like they're not really like decks almost. Like I don't consider Deal Star deck, I don't consider Horus a deck, but like they're like basically engines that increases the power levels of a lot of decks to a point where you need to play a lot of hand traps. But hand traps aren't necessarily good into Unchained, for example, right? But then Unchained like also has an issue with like breaking, like so it's like a kind of like a guessing game. And so I kind of just wanted to just talk about like where I'm at with the format and my thoughts overall. I'm kind of excited to see what happens at YCS Indie, but I'm not excited to necessarily play, and so I figured I'd just give my thoughts. Let me know how you guys feel. Actually, I'm kind of curious to see how people watching this actually feel about the format themselves, if they feel the same way, or if I'm actually like the lone voice in this opinion. But I would say test the format, give it a shot. Let me know what you think, because like I said, testing so far has not been great for me. Not been confident about my deck. I'm not really sure what to play, and I know this is not normally what I usually talk about, but I figured I kind of give my honest feedback, my thoughts on the format as I approach it. and kind of like serve as a diary for me to kind of like just write in terms of like what I've been thinking, and something for me to look back on as well. But hope you guys enjoyed this discussion, this talk, and let me know what you think. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.